Hello, welcome. We are often asked, what is Cheap Joe's? And we also get the question, is there a Cheap Joe? Is there really a person with that name? Well, I'm glad to answer yes, there is. And I happen to be Cheap Joe. And I'm really proud of it because we've created a really nice little company here. One that does much more than sell art material, which is our primary business. We've been doing that now for probably 30, 35 years. When we first started, it was in the drugstore, a drugstore. See, I was a pharmacist. And during the time I was a pharmacist, which was wonderful, I loved it. And I would travel or go to an art show somewhere and I would see a watercolor. I would think, you know what? I can do that. I know I can. Here I would go again to a museum or wherever, and I would see a watercolor that just looked so easy, so simple. And one day, I went down to our 5 and 10 cent store in Boone, which was the closest thing we had to an art material store. And I bought one of those little trays of Prang watercolor. You've seen them, they open up like that, and they have like 12 or 16 or 18 colors in it. And they have a little brush in it. And I also bought a pad that was labeled watercolor paper. Well, first off, I wouldn't give the little brush to somebody that I didn't even like. It's horrible. And the paper labeled watercolor paper, you couldn't get it wet because if you did, it came apart in just a second. So I guess the answer to that was don't use water in watercolor. Well, turns out that paper is the one essential ingredient that you cannot skimp on. You must have good, acid-free, 300-pound or 140-pound paper. Well, I took it up, I started painting, and I found a little print that I was copying. But somehow it didn't come out right. I just couldn't get it. Turns out that the print that I was trying to do was one of Andrew Weiss' paintings. And that's a pretty big jump from me to Andrew Weiss. Anyhow, I had a good friend named Roger Whitener. And Roger was in my drugstore twice a day, every day, having coffee. And he was just the epitome of an English gentleman. He had the plaid coat with the leather elbows in it. He walked slowly like he was thinking of something all the time. And he was just a very good friend. I thought the world of him. He asked me every time he'd come in the drugstore, he would say, I'd go over and sit and drink coffee with him. He'd say, Little Joe, what are you up to today? I know you've got a new project. Well, I told him, I said, well, Rogers, I've been trying to do watercolor, but I'm not doing very good at it. He said, really? I said, yeah, it's tough. I don't know quite what to do. And he came back in the afternoon. He had an envelope in his hand addressed to Joe Miller. And he said, Little Joe, come here. And I go there, and he handed it to me. He said, you can open it. And I opened it, and it was a little piece of paper that read, 3 free lessons with Noise Long for Joe Miller. Oh, I was just thrilled. And it turns out it was a gift that changed my life, literally. I just loved it. Anyhow, Rogers arranged for me to meet Noise Long. We did. So I said, what do I need to do? And he said, well, I think all you need to do is bring your paintings you've done and bring your tools that you're working with, and let's get together. How about tomorrow evening late? I said, that's perfect. Couldn't wait to get started. So I was scared to death to take the paintings I had done because they were horrible. Anyhow, he said, let's meet tomorrow evening. Bring your paintings and bring the tools you're painting with. Well, again, I was scared for him to see my paintings, but I got 4 or 5 that I had done. And I got up a couple of brushes that I had picked up, and that pad of watercolor paper that was awful. And I trucked it over to his office in the art department at Appalachian State University. He said, well, let's look at what you've got. So we went to one of the tables in the art class there, and he put them out on the table, and he very quietly looked at them and kind of made, and I thought, boy. And then in a minute he picks up this little mat, little white mat, that, like this one right here. And he took that and he put it on the painting, and he began to move it around on the painting. And suddenly he stops. And then he took a pencil and he went around the inside here on that painting. And then he moved around and he found one more. And he said, wow, how did you do that? I said, I don't know. He said, well, there is your painting right there. Take this back home and enlarge that into this big. And I'm going to give you a sheet of watercolor paper tonight for you to work on till we meet again. And he said, if you're going to keep this thing up, if you're going to continue, you've got to have better tools. And I said, okay, would you help me know what I need? He said, sure. So he wrote out a list while I was there. 25 sheets of Arches, 300-pound paper. Very expensive back then. Less today, I think, than even back then. And a size 12 sable brush from Winsor Newton. That was the top of the line brush back then, still would be. And a palette, 10 tubes of Winsor Newton watercolor, and a couple of other little things. Well, I couldn't wait for the next day to come so I could go buy my material, the list he'd given me. So I went to the 5 and 10 cent store, I've already told you, and bought that little praying thing, which was useless. He said, go get these, go get this list of things. So I couldn't find it in Boone, and I drove all the way to Charlotte, 100 miles from here, to an art store. And I went in, and this nice lady said, may I help you? And I said, yes, I have a list of stuff I want to get here. She said, okay, I'll help you. Said, why don't you let me get it up for you and you can be looking around? I said, that'd be great. So I start roaming through the store, and it was just fascinating to me. I was like a kid in a candy shop, so to speak. Anyhow, I'm roaming around the store, and here's all these fun things that I don't have a clue what they do, like masking fluid and slow and fast drying stuff, and just, anyhow, I was so tickled. Well, 3 or 4 minutes later, 5, she said, I have your material ready whenever you're ready. Don't rush. I said, okay. So I ambled around a minute, and I'll finally get over there. I said, how much do I owe for the things I'm buying? And she said, $750. I about fainted. I said, no. She said, yes. So I wrote a check for it, because I thought, if I'm going to do this thing, I got to have better material. And so I took it, put it in the back seat of my car, and headed up the mountain back to Boone. And coming up, a light came on in my head. And the light said, you know, Joe, drugstores sell everything. You're a pharmacist, you have a drugstore. Why don't you sell art supplies? And I thought, wow, that might be a good idea. It would certainly be a fun thing, and I would get my material at cost. Now that would be big. So instead of $750, I might have paid $500 or whatever. When I got back to Boone, I thought, you know, I'm going to start looking for a wholesale source of art material right now, and I'm going to clean off one of the little shelves here in the drugstore, put it on that, and we'll see how it does. Look, I couldn't find a source on art material anywhere. And one day someone told me, said, Joe, there's a guy in Greensboro doing a demonstration on watercolor this coming Sunday. And his name is Don Andrews. I said, oh, okay. Where in Greensboro do you know? Yeah, I said, it's at this hotel. And you need a ticket to get in. So I've got one. I've got you a ticket. I think that was Roger Whitener that did that too. Anyhow, Sunday I truck it down to Greensboro to see him do the demo. And Don Andrews did a painting in about an hour and a half that was just fabulous. And it looked like, again, anybody could do it. All you gotta do is pick up this brush, get some color on it, and about 10 strokes and you've got the painting. It just was the simplest looking thing you could paint with. And after the demo, I went up to him and I said, "Mr. Andrews." He said, "No, I'm Don." I thought, I'm going to like this man. And we shook hands and got acquainted, and they had a banquet there that night. And there was a gentleman at the door giving away these little tubes of paint, little 15 milliliter tubes of paint, Rembrandt. And I said, "Are you the rep for this company?" He said, "Yes, I am." "And what else do you have?" "Oh," he said, "I have Arches paper." I thought, oh boy, I have hit the mother lode. He said, "I have brushes, Winsor Newton brushes. I have everything you need for watercolor. That's why I'm here giving this paint away." And I said, "After dinner, could I talk to you?" He said, "No, we can talk right now." I said, "Okay." I said, "Let me go to my room a minute, I'll be right back." When I came back down, he was standing there at the door with a margarita in his hand. He wasn't giving those away, but he had a margarita in his hands, and it was just about an inch from being empty. And I said, "Steve," that was his name. "Steve," I said, what is that you're drinking with the salt on the rim?" "Oh," he said, "that's a margarita." I said, "Wow." He said, "Yeah, they're good." I said, "Well, yours is about empty. May I buy you another one?" "Well," he said, "that'd be nice for you to do that." So I called the bartender over and I said, "I want a margarita and a Diet Coke." In a minute, his glass was empty again. I bought him 3 margaritas. He had one when I got there. So I'm thinking, now's the time to hit him up again. So I said, "Steve, I wish you'd reconsider selling me art material." I said, "I'm going to have a store in Boone, a drugstore, where it will be displayed all by itself, and it'll be great." Now, he said, "The company would never let me ship to a drugstore, I can tell you." Well, my heart just broke again. But in about 30 minutes, when Steve was at his peak full of alcohol, I said, "Steve, please consider opening me an account. If it doesn't work, I'll walk away from it." He said, "Yeah, I'll be glad to sell to you. My goodness." I said, "Great." I said, "Let's write the order right now," because I knew some things I was going to get was the paper, the brush, the paint, that sort of thing. He said, "Well, I don't have any order blanks." I reached over and pulled a napkin out from this little thing, put a pen on it, and I said, "That's going to be our first order." And I wrote it out, 25 sheets of watercolor paper. Actually, I think I bought 100 the first time. And he transferred it in a day or two to one of the order blanks, which is now in our entrance at Cheap Joe's in Boone, that napkin there with everything on it. Sent the order in, and when the order came, I had what they call buyer's regret, because here was a pretty good amount of material and stuff, and it came to about $2,500. And I thought, boy, I've spent a lot of money. I hope it works. And I put it on the shelves, and I made this silly sign, 2 hooks in it, one on each side, and it said Cheap Joe's, great prices. Cheap Joe's art stuff, great prices. And I did it almost as a joke. Well, Dr. Long told his students about it, his art students, and Roger Whitener, of course, told some friends of his who were artists. And the first thing you know, it's moving right along. And my first employees were my son David and my niece Kelly. We would get an order on the phone. I'd answer Boone Drug, and they'd say, "No, I must have the wrong." I said, "No, you got the right number." And we would take the orders and put them on the fountain, which was a pretty large fountain at the drugstore. Then we'd get a box to put all the stuff in, and we'd ship it out. And we were doing 5 or 6 orders a day, and just tickled to death doing that. And the first thing you know, it's up considerably more than that. And of course, today it's lots more than that. And we have a lot more employees. We have some employees who've been with us 25 and 30 years. It's a great little company. I'm prejudiced, I know that, but I'm just so proud of Cheap Joe's art stuff. We appreciate your business if you're a customer. Another thing I want to tell you is that we have a 501c3. And that's a tax-deductible foundation that we give art material to children in crisis. Wherever they are needed and requested, we send it out. The other thing we do is when there's a hurricane, a tornado, and a flood, and for goodness, we've had our share of those, we send a card out or a note or do it online. If you've lost art material, we'd like to help you get back to painting as quickly as we can, because we know they're not thinking it, but art is healing. And if I had a situation or their house burned down, we've had several of those, and we give them some art material to help get them back in the thing. So, I hope I haven't bored you. I've meandered along, and I wish I could take your questions, and maybe I can. I'm not sure about that, but we'll check on it. Thanks so much for being with me. Cheap Joe here.